These shoes are what they call barefoot shoes or minimal shoes. I've been wearing them for years, and according to the advertising, they are much better for you than normal shoes. They don't squash your toes in, they allow you to develop more strength in your feet and better balance, according to the advertising. But that could be complete BS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some research on that. I'm going to plug that into AI, produce a video, learn from that, and that should pop out of, I reckon, the back of that cowl right about now.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're actually looking down at our feet and asking some pretty fascinating questions about the very ground we walk on. I am super excited to dive right into this with you because we're going to unpack the actual science and biomechanics behind the whole minimalist footwear movement. So whether you're a hardcore runner, maybe someone just dealing with daily footache, or you're just genuinely intrigued by how human biology clashes with modern technology, let's discover what's literally going on inside our everyday shoes. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, the modern footwear cast. Then 2, evolutionary mismatch theory. 3, the biomechanics of minimalist shoes. 4, the concrete substrate challenge. And finally, number 5, rebuilding your foot core. Let's get into it. Section 1, the modern footwear cast. Rethinking daily shoes. We really need to start by looking at an absolutely everyday object in a completely new, strictly biological light. Imagine you've got your arm in a rigid orthopedic cast for 6 weeks, right? What happens when the doctor finally saws that cast off? Well, the muscles have significantly atrophied, your joint mobility is incredibly restricted, and your skin sensitivity is way heightened because, well, it hasn't interacted with the environment at all. Biomechanically speaking, modern, stiff-soled, high-arch shoes operate basically as mild, semi-permanent casts, except instead of wearing them for 6 weeks, we're wearing them over decades. By restricting our toe splay, rigidifying the foot's natural arch, and immobilizing joint articulation, these conventional shoes act exactly like that arm cast, causing massive disuse atrophy of the foot's structural core. So the real crucial takeaway here is that this restrictive footwear leads to what experts actually call sensory and motor amnesia in our lower extremities. Think about that feeling, that absolute relief when you finally kick off a stiff pair of dress shoes or heavy work boots at the end of a long day. That is literally your foot celebrating the end of its confinement. Because we constantly rely on the shoe to do the work, our modern sedentary lifestyles and restrictive footwear have made us trade our natural, built-in biological structural integrity for temporary, artificial external stability. We've effectively outsourced the highly complex job of our feet to, foam and synthetic fabrics. Moving right along to Section 2, evolutionary mismatch, biology versus modernity. Let's see how this whole concept builds upon our long evolutionary history. The core of the modern rewilding trend is perfectly explained by something called evolutionary mismatch theory. This is a formal academic construct, and it basically posits that biological traits selected for an ancient environment, like say barefoot movement on highly varied natural terrain, actually become dysfunctional when they're suddenly exposed to novel modern environments. And in this case, that modern environment is rigid, highly cushioned footwear on hard, flat, artificial surfaces. In wellness culture today, consumers are really starting to question the over-engineering of our daily products. People are seeking biomechanical self-reliance over technological interventions. Essentially, they want their bodies to do the heavy lifting, not their gear. When you actually lay it out on a timeline, the mismatch becomes incredibly obvious. For over 99% of human history, natural movement occurred either entirely barefoot or in flexible leather hide coverings. Think ancient moccasins or thin sandals. Sure, these materials protected against cuts and elements, but they absolutely did not alter foot mechanics. It really wasn't until the 1970s that the elevated heel, wedge, and thick EVA midsole foam were invented and widely popularized. Human structural anatomy, our stride mechanics, and our postural reflexes evolved perfectly fine without these recent additions. Biologically speaking, walking in heavily cushioned shoes is kind of like wearing 1970s disco bell-bottoms on our feet. It's a relatively recent stylistic modern invention that fundamentally changes how we actually move through the world. All right, Section 3, minimal biomechanics, unlocking the foot's structural core. So what exactly happens mechanically when we strip away all that thick 1970s cushioning? Well, it really comes down to the number 20. It turns out your foot is absolutely not a structural flaw requiring external bracing or artificial arch support. It's a highly dynamic biological tool containing 20 individual intrinsic muscles. These are muscles that originate and insert entirely within the foot itself, meaning they're perfectly designed for localized, tiny micro-adjustments. Minimal footwear acts as an active physical stimulus. When you take away that artificial support, you immediately trigger hypertrophic adaptation and neuromuscular recruitment in these 20 muscles. And those muscles are directly responsible for maintaining your foot's longitudinal and transverse arches. To actually activate those muscles, barefoot or minimalist footwear relies on pure functional simplicity. They feature a zero heel-to-toe drop, which just means your heel and the ball of your foot are perfectly level with the ground. They have wide toe boxes so your toes can splay outwards naturally for balance, and they use thin, flexible soles. These specific design choices are brilliant because they allow the dense mechanoreceptors on the sole of your foot to function the way they were meant to. Think of these mechanoreceptors like a high-speed internet connection for your brain. Instead of a thick shoe acting as a sensory filter that, scrambles the Wi-Fi signal, thin soles allow real-time spatial and tactile data to travel completely unattenuated straight up to your central nervous system, which is constantly fine-tuning your balance and your gait. Now notice how changing the footwear geometry fundamentally shifts your biological load. This is called kinematic chain redistribution, and honestly, it's vital to understanding this entire debate. With conventional shoes, thanks to that elevated heel and thick cushioning, we're basically prompted to use a rear foot or heel strike. This sends elevated transient force spikes right up through your tibia, knee, and hip joints. But look over at the minimalist side. Minimalist footwear shifts your kinematics toward a midfoot or forefoot strike pattern. You are fundamentally redistributing joint torque away from your knees and hips and sending it down towards your ankle complex, your calf musculature, and your Achilles tendon. You're utilizing internal muscular engagement rather than passive shock absorption to deal with gravity and impact. Which brings us to Section 4, the concrete substrate challenge, the limits of pure minimalist mechanics. Okay, but before you run to the closet and literally throw away all your padded shoes, we really have to impartially examine the very real limitations of this approach in today's modern world. The reality is, evolution optimized the human foot beautifully, yes, but it optimized it for dynamic, yielding surfaces like soil, sand, and varied vegetation. Just take a look outside. Our modern urban landscapes consist almost entirely of rigid, flat, unyielding concrete and asphalt. This highlights a major ongoing debate in the biomechanics community over whether pure minimalist mechanics remain fully advantageous on these artificial surfaces, or if our modern, unnatural concrete environments actually demand a hybrid approach to shock attenuation. And this brings us right to what researchers call the transition paradox. We established a minute ago that minimal shoes don't eradicate mechanical strain, they simply shift it. So while you might be beautifully reducing impact stress at your knee joint, minimal footwear dramatically increases the strain on the metatarsals, the plantar fascia, and the Achilles tendon. And here's the harsh truth. Transitioning to these shoes way too quickly, without allowing for proper tissue remodeling, leads directly to stress fractures and tendinopathy. You simply cannot undo decades of wearing a foot cast in a single weekend. Your body requires time to lay down new collagen and reinforce those previously dormant structures. Furthermore, we absolutely have to consider structural individuality. Minimal footwear is simply not universally suitable for everyone right out of the box. Individuals dealing with pathological foot conditions, deeply set structural rigidities, advanced neuropathy, where feeling is compromised, or severe anatomical misalignments, they all require serious clinical oversight and structured gait retraining. This is a highly individualized biological journey, and pushing through structural limitations blindly can definitely cause much more harm than good. So let's talk solutions in Section 5, rebuilding your foot core. Practical steps for foot health. How do we actually navigate this safely? Well, the gold standard here is progressive load management. If you want to apply this science to your own life for better postural health, adapting to minimal footwear must be treated as a long-term strength and conditioning process. It is definitely not an overnight gear change. You want to start small. Introduce bare or minimal foot exposure incrementally. Begin with just short periods of walking around the house or maybe doing dynamic mobility exercises. Gradually move to incremental outdoor exposure. And you should only ever transition to high-impact activities like running or jumping long after your tissues have been given the time to naturally remodel and strengthen to handle that new workload. To regain that natural alignment, you want to focus on restored foot articulation. Performing these simple daily drills rebuilds intrinsic foot control regardless of what shoes you choose to wear to work. You can try something called toe yoga. I know, it sounds a little funny, but it involves actively isolating your big toe and trying to extend it away from your lesser toes, which, spoiler alert, is surprisingly difficult at first. You can also practice short foot arch activation exercises, where you actively pull the ball of your foot toward your heel to raise the arch. And honestly, simply spend time walking completely barefoot on safe, natural outdoor terrain to just wake those stabilizing muscles up. Ultimately, you want to restore that lost sensory input. Reconnecting your feet with varied natural textures directly improves your balance and your body awareness. By periodically kicking off your shoes on grass, sand, or rough natural ground, you restore vital somatosensory input straight back to your brain. This enhances your dynamic stability, it improves your postural alignment, and it drastically increases your movement awareness across all your daily activities. It basically helps your body map out exactly where it is in physical space. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder the next time you head out the door. As you navigate the concrete jungles of our modern world, think about that ergonomic fatigue and the technology wrapped around your feet. Ask yourself, are your shoes actually supporting your feet, or have they been quietly doing the work for them all these years? It's been an absolute pleasure guiding you through this explainer today. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and until next time, keep learning and keep moving.
I've got to state my bias here and state a little bit of potential conflict of interest, although I don't think it is. I was asked to make this video by a company down in Melbourne called bPrimal, and they did offer to pay me for it. I'm not going to take that payment. I'm doing this because I do honestly believe in the concept of barefoot shoes, and that barefoot shoes are better for you than normal everyday shoes. So I'm doing this for free. I don't take payment. I've been wearing barefoot shoes for about half a decade now. This is one of my first pair. This one has walked hundreds of kilometers in Australia, these ones. So I don't know where the other one is. This one has done reforestation in Africa. It has done, no, these ones haven't been through Europe. I've got another pair that recently went back to Africa, went through the UK, France, the Netherlands, and was picking up litter in Turkey. I am particularly impressed by this particular brand, LEMS, L-E-M-S. Once again, I'm not receiving any money or any recompense from them. These are just awesome shoes. It'd be super dumb to wear barefoot shoes on a motorbike like this. With barefoot shoes, take your time, transition over slowly, give them a go. Perhaps buy them, wear them on the weekend, do a little bit of walking around in places like this where you have varied environments.